This is clearly the recommended brush for painting walls. So the plaster magic that we use to fix the plaster is, it's hard to explain, but it's kind of like glue. And we've been using so much of it in the caulk gun that the caulk gun accreted this entire collar of used plaster magic, so much so that I could no longer fit a new tube of plaster magic into the caulk gun. So I've now pried this out so that I can continue working on plaster in this room.
As lifelong bibliophiles, Gabriel and I have both always dreamed of having a house with a room just for our books, our own private library. A spare room on the ground floor of this house, which was originally intended as a second parlor, was just the ticket. But of course, like everything else in the house, we had to fix it first. There was the same sort of plaster repair you've seen in the other rooms. Then we had to paint on a base coat of fresh paint over the grimy old paint, while carefully painting around what was left of the original stencils.
So, in this room, in this corner, in this room, we have a lot of beautiful old stencils, which I've carefully painted around, and some of them are intact, and some of them decidedly are not, because this room is on the ground floor, and yet because the roof was leaking for so long, there was water pouring down through the ceilings upstairs, through the upstairs floor, through the ceilings down here. And so this room is one of the rooms that had its plaster almost completely destroyed. We had to go through, stabilize all the plaster, and there were portions where the plaster had fallen off. So that's what you see, what you're seeing here and over there. And so plaster was redone, and then now I'm having to redo the stencils where the stencils had fallen out because the plaster fell out. And do that, I have to copy an intact stencil. And then after I've done this, I need to transfer the stencils to some matte paper that's not going to be reflective like the plastic is. And then Gabriel's going to take them to the Des Moines Central Library and use a tool called the Glowforge to cut them out. There has to be some repainting done. Like here, a big chunk of the plaster was just gone. And you can see what I've managed to preserve versus what I've had to repaint from the stencil we created. I'd gotten a little ways on doing that, and I looked around the room. Just doing those things and then leaving the ceiling as a wash as it had been, it was just a little too obvious that it had been damaged and repaired, and I didn't want to live with that for the rest of my life. So I'm adding in some more details, keeping the original stuff where I could, but adding in some extra stuff above and beyond what was here when we came. And you can see the wreath I've almost finished, still needs the roses, and the extra roses I'm putting in. Now, if any of you have ever seen a painting by Sir Elma Tadema, there's a really beautiful old Victorian painting of a scene in ancient Rome where the guests are being smothered alive in rose petals. And that's kind of the image I'm going to be going for here. And the idea is to put enough roses on the ceiling that they distract from the repairs. And where I've gotten these... so for the stencils that I'm repairing for the original ones, I traced the stencils that are still here, and we cut those out. For the new ones I'm adding, I actually got the patterns for those from a dress that I have. And the fabric of that dress is a copy of a 19th century fabric. And I traced that Victorian fabric to make stencils for my ceiling. And the idea is to make this all look like we're being covered in roses that are falling from the sky. So hopefully I can pull it off.
When I was finally satisfied with the number of roses around the room, we were able to fix the various damaged places in the wood floor, then sand and revarnish it. We'd been doing this in each room we'd repaired as the last stage before we considered ourselves finished, but this was the only one where we bothered getting any video footage of it. Once this last stage was done, we finally had our own library.
So this is what I used to outline the petals of the roses in the wreath, just at the center of the library. And because it's a library, it has to be special. The format of it, if any of you are old enough to remember carbon paper, which I am, the format of it is very much like carbon paper. So you see it's very, very thin. But what this actually is, it actually is gold. The sheets of this that it took to do the wreath in the center of the library room, it wound up, it would probably be a lot more now because currency fluctuates and gold fluctuates, but it wound up being about the same cost as 1 extra gallon of paint. And when you're doing house stuff, an extra gallon of paint it's an extra gallon of paint. So this wound up being about the same price as that. But anyhow, the way that this winds up getting applied is there's a special fixative. There's special glues for everything. And so I had to paint on the special gold leaf glue with a tiny little paintbrush, just like I was outlining all the rest of the rose petals with my 00 paintbrush. This time I did it in glue and then pressed the sheets against it. And then when it dried, I peeled it off. And yeah, it's pretty cool stuff, but it's only just on that wreath, just to make the center of the library extra special. And actually, in the old pagan temples that neoclassicals are based on, there was a lot of gold. They had much, much thicker gold. Actually, in the real Parthenon, it's kind of cool, actually, because what they did in ancient Greece, when Athens got into debt and needed more money, they would essentially borrow money from the gods, because they would actually take the gold plating off of the statue of Athena, put it in hock, pay off their debts, and then when they had money again, they would re-gold the statue. This isn't substantial enough to do that. But it's a cool history.